friends are synths.
Back when I first started getting into electronic music, rather than making music with like big expensive or proper synthesizers, I was much more interested in kind of musical toys or noise boxes or kind of weird glitchy things. And if you've been following the channel for many years, you'll probably recognise what I'm going to talk about today, because I used this or something very similar to it early on when I was demonstrating different effects pedals, and that is the Qadrox. This wee thing is essentially a weird glitchy synthesizer which has got an 8-step sequencer in a rotating pattern on the front. And it's made by a company called SISMO. I believe they're from Colombia, although it says that in the bottom, but I was sure they were from Brazil, but hey, shows what I know. They've been kicking about for years and they make all sorts of interesting art noise devices. They're still doing things to this day, except their designs are a bit more refined now, whereas I still quite like their older stuff. They made a whole bunch of different versions of this, and there was something about it that really appealed to me. It kind of looks like like it's got that MS-20 Mini or MS-20 I guess style curvature, but it just looks really industrial and it appeals to me on various levels. Now, I had one of these years ago and I unfortunately sold it because as I got more into the world of proper synthesis and stuff like that, I found that it wasn't quite as useful at the time. It's a bit of a strange beast, so it didn't really have a space in my studio and I sold it to buy some other stuff. But recently I found myself regretting that, because it is an interesting bit of equipment and it does things, or it kind of inspires you to do things that not many other bits of hardware do. So today I wanted to show you what it is and kind of play about with it a bit more. I managed to pick up another one on eBay. They don't make them anymore, but there is one, or I found one on eBay a few weeks ago for about 70 quid, which, to be honest, is probably a bit too expensive for what it is. It's basically a really simple circuit in here. It's got some chip that oscillates and then you can sequence it. My old one had a freeze button on it, which you freeze the sequence, and this one has an LFO in it, I think, which kind of disrupts the sound a wee bit. It's very glitchy, very unstable. And this one in particular is fairly not quite as musical as the last one, but it can still sound pretty cool when you put it through a bunch of effects or whatever. On the back, you've got an audio output here, which is a proper jack output. We've got a clock in, I think, and a clock out, I think it is. They were different on the other models, so I'm not entirely sure. But what I'm going to do is try it out with a few different effects and see if I can get some cool sequences. The way I tend to use this now is I either clock it from an external source, so I know what the BPM is, and then I build up sequences from there, add drums or whatever. But I also sometimes just use it for textures, because if you put it into something like the hologram electronics microcosm, it can end up sounding very either evil, like the last time I tried it, it sounded like a devil laughing or something like that, but it can also just give you some quite nice textures. So I'm going to plug it in, let you hear it in its raw form, and then I might try and make a track with it. I'm not sure. I'll probably play about with it. Anyway, the idea is today I'm going to fuck about with it and see what I can do with it. It reminds me of something from Doctor Who, actually. That's exactly what it is. So I think every studio should have things like this. You can always have lots of kind of expensive synthesizers or serious bits of equipment, but the things I find myself reaching for more often than not are things like this, because who doesn't want to use something like this? It's just begging to be used. So I'm going to plug it in and see what we can do with it. So this is the Qadrox. I've hooked it up. It's got a 12 volt DC thing. It doesn't tell you on the back, which is annoying, but I do have this handy leaflet thing that came with it. This tells me that on the back there is sync in and out. There is audio output. We have square, triangle oscillators here.
This is the speed of an LFO, allegedly. This is oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. So there's 2 oscillators in here, so that's interesting. This middle thing controls the speed of the sequence. As you can see, when I change it there, the sequence speed changes. And then these are the steps 1 to 8. 1 is there, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, I'm going to plug it in and let you hear what it sounds like raw. And then, I don't know, see where we go from there. So prepare yourself, because this is not the nicest noise in the world. Oh yes, listen to that. Now, I'll turn this down just now. I can't really figure out why it's doing this just now, right? Because this must just be the LFO that's gone off, because if I change this, that's the LFO speed. But it doesn't seem tied to any of the particular steps, if you know what I mean. So, I don't really understand. So right now, none of the sequencers or, you know, sequence variation is doing anything, which I think is a bit weird. But if I adjust the... Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I'll adjust the oscillator. Fuck knows. So if I start adjusting the steps, maybe we'll get some... As you can see, it's quite hard to get something that is actually tuneful in this one. If I recall correctly, my older one was a bit more tuneful, and it was much more tied to the sequencer. Like, it didn't make a noise without the sequencer. It wasn't, you know, tied to the sequencer. So this one appears to have some kind of free-running LFO that's doing mad shit in the background, and that's fine, because if I wanted a normal sequence, I would have something else. Oh, here we go. This might actually... Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Now you can hear with this that it's quite hard to dial in a sound that is in some way musical. You really have to play about with the balance between the oscillators, the LFO speed and everything to get something, if you want it to have like a melodic edge, whereas a lot of the time it is very just chaotic noise. Now, what I'm going to do, now you've got an idea of what this sounds like, I'm going to patch it into some shit, like some effects, and try and make it sound a bit more usable, because I think the key with this thing, on its own, it's dry, it just sounds... I mean, it sounds like it sounds just now. But if you use it with effects, and you can start to generate some interesting bleepy bloopy stuff that can then be layered up and sound quite cool, actually, I think. Or I hope anyway, or I've just fucking wasted another 70 quid. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to patch up into a reverb on my Eurorack for now. I've got Pittsburgh modules, I think. Reverb, a Verbtronic, and we'll see how that sounds. I'm going to stick it through a delay now and see how that sounds. I'll dial down the speed a wee bit. Into a delay. finally for now I'm going to go through a bucket brigade delay. It's a Doepfer A-188-1 and it's one of the 4096 stages module. Listen to how god awful that sounds. It sounds like something's dying. Alright, that's quite enough of that for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to plug this into something like a drum machine, and I'm going to clock it from the drum machine, I think, and then I'm going to try and get some patterns that I can then use for something else, because otherwise, I mean, on its own, this is fucking clearly too mental. So let's see what I can do with that. Right. Oh, fuck off. Right, so I've got a drum beat. It's a pretty terrible drum beat, to be fair, but for these purposes, I don't think it matters too much. So I'm going to plug in this again, if I can find the output, and I'm going to plug it through a reverb because I think that will sound a bit better. Actually, what I have to do first is clock these together. So I'm going to clock this from my multi-clock here, and then I'm going to send the clock out from the multi-clock into the Eurorack, and then send the clock from that into this, which is a bit of a roundabout way of doing it, but it's probably the easiest way for me to set up just now. So clock in, clock in.
So that is the SISMO Qadrox. In many ways, it's a horrible, horrible device. It doesn't tune particularly nicely. The oscillators don't even blend that well or play that well together. I don't really understand what the fuck the LFO is doing on there. But actually, in many ways, the instability of it is kind of what makes it interesting, because it means that even though you need to kind of coax it a wee bit, when you do find those sweet spots and you get the right kind of effects, it can begin to give you a nice kind of haunting melody. And actually, that kind of slightly discordant sound is quite appealing to me. So it's also something that I wouldn't write on my own. Like, it's not a melody I would sit and come up with if I was thinking about, you know, each note. So in that case, or for that purpose, I quite like it. And actually, some of the stuff that I've just been playing about with there for this video, I'm going to go grab my laptop and record because I think it could actually be pretty good. But aye, that's the reason that I quite like these cheaper devices that do strange things, because it does make you think a bit differently about your composition and you can have lots of happy accidents with them. Like I said, SISMO still do make devices. They don't make this anymore, but they make variations of them. And if you're looking for something a bit weird, then it's worth taking a look. They're on Etsy, I believe, so it's worth having a look at their stuff there. Thank you for watching. I have nothing else to say. Goodbye.